Welcome back, everyone. Enjoy the tabletop contest? I would now like to reintroduce our contest master. Thank you. Welcome back. Long commercial break there. Okay. Welcome to the Toastmasters District 84 Area 70 International Speech Contest. A few reminders. If you turned your phone on during the break, please take a moment to silence it now. If you did not turn your phone back on during the break, please take a moment to look at your phone and ensure it is still silenced. Once again, no flash photography during the speeches. Contestants have consented to be recorded on video. Let's see. Sergeant at Arms has been instructed not to allow anyone to enter or leave during any of the speeches. You may only enter or leave in between speeches. Okay, just a quick brief of the rules for the International Speech Contest. Each speech is 5 to 7 minutes long. There is a 30-second buffer on each side of that time requirement to be eligible to place in the contest. Speeches must be at least 4.5 minutes in length, but no longer than 7.5 minutes. The lights, green light will come on at 5 minutes, yellow light at 6 minutes, and the red light at 7 minutes. The red light will remain on until the contestant completes their speech. Once again, there will be 1 minute of silence in between each of the speeches. And after the last contestant, the audience is requested to remain silent for 2 minutes or until all the ballots have been collected and the judges leave the room. Protests are limited to judges and contestants. The decision of the judges is final and the announcement of the results is final. The speaking order for the International Speech Contest is as follows. Ken Gentile is number 1. Write the last names in, shame on me. Henry Russell is number 2. Number 3 will be Eugene Kowalski. Number 4 will be Donna Gentile. No.
What? Is that a change in the order?
We have had a change, I'm sorry about
Stephen
that.
Williams.
Stephen Williams was unable to make it today, so Donna is filling in for him. And the 5th contestant will be Stephanie Byrne. So the rules have been reviewed with the chief judges and the contestants have been informed of the location of the timing lights, and once again, the speaking area is right up here. Sergeant of Arms, have you secured the door?
Yes.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, contestant number 1.
Contestants may remain in the room.
Contestants may remain in the room. Thank you, Irving.
Do we need a 1 minute of silence now?
Not from Irving.
I think we do. I think we do.
Ladies and gentlemen, contestant number 1, Ken Gentile. Protect yourself. Protect yourself, Ken Gentile.
Surprise! That was me 13 years ago at my 40th surprise birthday party. It was truly an exclamation point moment in my life. See, punctuation marks on paper take words and phrases and make them feelings in life. Have you ever thought what punctuation marks your life? As Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters and honored guests, I'm hoping that after my talk today, you will re-examine and perhaps redefine what punctuation marks your life. Very early on in life, when we're young, we're filled with wonderment, and our lives are filled with question marks. Some of the greatest thinking comes from questions. Some of the greatest inventions come from questions. Why am I here? Where am I going? What's the purpose and meaning of life? What do I want to be when I grow up? But anyone who's a parent knows that oftentimes questions, if rendered too often can become a little annoying. Have you ever had a 5-year-old who wants to stay up later and wants, can I have a glass of water? Or why? They keep asking these questions till, I'm sure if you're all honest, you will say that at the end of that, your answer was, because I said so, which ended with a period. But questions are important, and good questions sometimes are never answered. And questions are the basis of wisdom, so they need to continually be asked. As we get a little older, though, we find that in the middle years, maybe our teens into our early 20s, we're filled with exclamation marks. When was the last time you rode a roller coaster and screamed with delight, or laughed at a funny joke so much you almost had to pee? Or maybe jumped out of a perfectly good airplane? You see, exclamation points really, as we heard before, are the moments in life that make life worth living. Then as we go down into our latter years, we find that our lives are filled with periods. The smallest form of punctuation, but sometimes follows the most profound thoughts. If you can think of quotes like, "To err is human, to forgive divine," or "When you come to a fork in the road, take it." Some of the greatest thinking comes from phrases that end in periods. But periods can be so violent. They kind of end the conversations. The conversation killers oftentimes, because they don't leave any room for discussion. Which kind of brings me to the comma. The comma, really a period with a mullet, is very similar to a period. But yet they're worlds different. While a period ends the conversation, a comma gives the sentence balance. It gives it rhythm. It gives it clarity. A comma allows you to pause and take a step back. Sometimes life gives us commas, where we can take a step back and reflect of who we are, what we're doing, and where we're going. I love commas, and I find very often I spend time in those commas to think and reflect and do what I think is important and reprioritize my life. I find that in Toastmasters is one of the few moments or organizations that I'm accustomed to or have the opportunity to speak at, is a time when we really truly listen to one another. Not just the words, but the ums and the uhs and everything else that goes with it, but we truly listen. And I find that in life we don't do that very often. I had a comma moment about 3 weeks ago at a family gathering, and there were 6 of us seated around a table, and we were having a conversation, discourse, and one by one, everyone went to their smartphones and started getting on Facebook and texting. I realized that texting is really the crack cocaine of the English language. You know, it's not about so much the communication. I understand there's some value to that, but there is no lasting purpose. And I realized we were not really interacting the way that I thought we would. When I returned to work, and I don't know how many of you are in corporate America, but we use bullet points a lot. And bullets are the hitmen of the English language, okay? There's no sentence structure at all. It's just, give me the facts. What do I need to know? I don't want any sentences at all. As a matter of fact, I don't even want Word, I want PowerPoint. So I find that used a lot in corporate America. But I believe if you take a step back and you truly think about how do you want your life story punctuated? Do you want a life story filled with exclamation points, with a lot of commas, with questions? The good news is you can determine your life story, the punctuation that goes in it. And I want to give you a challenge today. I want you to take a step back, live in the moment, live in the comma, and decide what punctuation defines your life story. The good news is you can choose how you want to spend today and what type of punctuation you want to live. I would suggest that you dream big, exclamation point. That you ask questions, question mark, and never cease learning. That you take a step back in the comma and reflect what is really truly important in your life. I believe that if you do that, you won't be sorry, you won't regret it. It'll be a moment that you'll be thankful for years to come. Because in truth, at the end of your life, the punctuation that only exists is the dash on your tombstone between the year born and the year died. leave your legacy, live a life with full punctuation. Mr. Toastmaster.
Very good.
Timers, may we have 1 minute of silence, please? Ladies and gentlemen, contestant number 2, Henry Russell. Smoke in the theater. Smoke in the theater, Henry Russell.
Fire. Fire. Great roaring balls of fire! Not quite shouted in a crowded theater, but a good place to start a discussion about the freedom and limits of speech nonetheless. After all, when asked for an actual example of when it would be proper to limit speech, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes gave the example of shouting fire in a crowded theater. Who would disagree with such a decision? Well, my fellow Toastmasters, guests, comrades, and friends, I hope that by the end of this speech, you will all start to question as well. What Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes was doing in Schenck, United States, was sending to prison a group of Yiddish-speaking socialists for simply daring to oppose the drafting of unwilling citizens into the army for the First World War. They were arrested and convicted for, in essence, yelling fire as smoke filled the theater. And the Mall of the Western Front vindicated them by consuming an entire generation. But once again, free speech is under assault, this time in the guise of causing offense. Perhaps within the last year, there has been no greater example of that than the terrorist attack on the French satirical magazine, d84, by Muslim fundamentalists. There was a massive outpouring of support for the magazine, but many have added qualifications, including no less a person than His Holiness the Pope, who said, while he expressed sympathies for the loss of life, stated that the freedom of speech does not include the right to offend another's religion. I find this particularly ironic coming from the head of the Catholic Church. I wonder what Martin Luther would have to say about the Church's respect for other religions. But little historical ironies aside, the Pope's statement does bring up an important issue. The freedom of speech must include the right to offend, criticize, and yes, ridicule religion. But, you might say, religion is such a personal, beautiful, and spiritual thing. Shouldn't it remain above criticism? Yes, if it remained at the individual level. But when religion says that AIDS is very bad, but condoms are worse, when it says murder is wrong, but kill anyone who leaves your religion, when it says domestic violence is sad, but the woman deserved it because she didn't fully submit to her husband, and then it has the audacity to demand to be placed above criticism, the only just response is mockery. But Even if religion was completely and utterly blameless in every one of those instances, I would still defend a person's right to criticize it. Why? Because the freedom of speech is not just a right to speak. It is the right of every one of you to listen and to hear and to think. When someone attempts to silence someone else, they're not just preventing the speaker to speak, they are preventing you from being exposed to new ideas, both holy and profane. If an ideal is repulsive and utterly without any social importance, by all means oppose it. I'll probably join you with opposing it. But don't you dare silence it, because the freedom of speech is meaningless unless it means the right to speak and think differently. But there's a bigger issue. Who is going to decide? Who is going to decide which speech is harmful and who should protect us from unpleasant and insanely truths with honeyed lies? Who, in essence, are we going to select as censor? The government can't be trusted to do it. They censor everything critical of themselves and leave the populace ignorant and easily controllable. The various churches of the world are equally, if not more, unsuited, as science would quickly grind to a halt under their tender mercies. Never mind what they would try and do to each other. So, who remains? Does anyone have a nomination? And if you do, what right does that individual or organization have over me? I, who have been tutored by saints and heretics? I, who have read the madness of Mein Kampf and the infectious enthusiasm of the Communist Manifesto? Workers of the world, unite! I, who have talked with patriots and terrorists and find them more similar than most would be comfortable to admit. If you wish to remain blind, childlike, with a big brother to defend you against the world and let slip only the most benign ideals, so be it. But don't you dare try and silence my tongue, for you will only find it sharper. So I say, fire, fire, fire. And I hope that I have opened some of your minds and all of your ears. The freedom of speech is not just the right to speak your mind. It is the right to have a mind, and is the keystone of a democracy. Yes, there will be people who will get offended, and this is good. Yes, the highest ideas in the land will be dragged through the mud, but they will become stronger for it. If an ideal cannot survive in the rigorous, boisterous marketplace of ideals, then it should be discarded. Yes, politicians will have insults hurled at them. They should grow a tougher skin or get out of the game. And yes, if your faith in your God is so weak that a mocking cartoon will cause you a crisis of faith that will cause you to lash out in violence, you might want to rethink your theology. Thank you.
Timers, may we have 1 minute on the clock, please? Thank you.
Wait,
The script is so good, I just got drawn right into it.
Wait till you read the next page.
Ladies and gentlemen, contestant number 3, Eugene Kowalski. Change. Change. Eugene Kowalski.
Has anyone here ever taken change and put it into a piggy bank? Your loose change, have you ever put it in a piggy bank? I have. Have we ever tried to manage change? Or have we accepted change as what it is? Or tried to fight change? Change can be bittersweet. Sometimes change comes at the least opportune time. Mr. Contest Master, fellow Toastmasters and honored guests. Yes, I've experienced change. When I was 17 years old, my girlfriend came to me, she was 16, and says, "Honey, I'm pregnant. How could this be?" She told me she couldn't get pregnant. Then I found myself in front of a judge asking to marry this woman and raise this child. I had to make a case in front of a judge at the age of 17. The judge agreed. I went on to get a job. But a job to me wouldn't work for me. I needed a career or a business to be successful. I went on and I stumbled into an Army recruiter right after the Vietnam War. He says, "I have a deal for you." I said, "I'm not interested." He said, "I can give you a 2-year enlistment, 4 years paid college, and an all-expense paid trip to Germany." Sign me up. My wife and daughter and I went to Germany. One of the things I found out in Germany when I was there, it was probably the biggest change for me, was they were having college courses. And I had a dyslexia problem in grade school and high school. I never did well in studies. I never thought I'd go to college. But I thought I would take a chance. University of Maryland was offering a course in economics. And I thought, if I signed up to this class, and even if I didn't finish it, I could say I went to college. But I took the course, and I read, and I reread the material, and read it over again, and found that it made sense to me. And the next thing I knew, I found myself taking the exam. I got my grade. It was an A. I was dumbfounded. How could this happen? Somebody with dyslexia. I kept taking more courses and more courses from one little-known university. To me, anyway, it was unknown to me. Maybe some of you know it. It's called Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. I got 30 college credit hours. I made the dean's list. What a great change that was. All of these changes start adding up to more change than I had in my piggy bank. I went to Daytona, started studying, spent 25 years developing a successful business. My daughter calls me on the phone, says, "Dad, I want change." "What kind of change do you want, honey?" She says, "I want a divorce." "Wait a minute, hold everything. I'll be on the next plane to Detroit. Pick me up in the morning." She picked me up. We start driving to Niagara Falls, which is about a 5-hour ride. And she had all her arguments laid out. And I said, "Any questions?" I said, "Yes. How are you going to deal with child care? You're going to school, you're working, you have to deal with the household, you have to buy groceries, and you're going to date somebody new. How are you going to manage all of that?" And for the next hour, she went on to explain to me how she was going to manage all that. And kind of, my daughter's type, you couldn't tell her not to do something because she'd do just the opposite. I said, "Well, how are you going to deal with the fact that people are going to say that you turned out just like your father?" Her hands clenched the wheel and focused on the road and didn't hear anything from her for about an hour. But today, they're still married because of I tried to guide change in a direction. My business was doing really well. They say to be successful, you have to work half days. And it doesn't matter whether you work the first 12 hours or the second 12 hours, as long as you work half days. And believe me, I was working half days. And I was, to my own standards, I was successful. My doctor gave me a call and said, it's time to come in for a physical. I said, listen, doc, I don't have any time. Called again. Finally, I went in. Had some tests, and he says, you have prostate cancer. Oh my God, what am I do now? A change. I'm going to have to manage it. I talked to at least 12 different doctors, some of them multiple times. I talked to cancer patients, and the best advice I got was from a crying wife of a cancer patient asking me to get medication and it looked at immediately. And I did. I had the cancer removed. The best decision of my life. Again, brought about by an unexpected change in your piggy bank. How does your change stack up? Don't let anybody take your change away from you. Mr. Contest Master.
Timers, may we have 1 minute of silence, please? Go, the light has changed. I paid attention this time, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, contestant number 4, Donna Gentile. Kick ice. Kick ice, Donna Gentile.
Please rise and raise your wine glasses, and if you don't have one, shame on you, because John Zelensky said the room is free. Contest master, fellow Toastmasters, and other guests, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for having Toastmasters and helping people like me who froze with fear at even the thought of speaking for 30 seconds in public to be able to come here today, and be voluntold that you are speaking today. Close your eyes for a minute and think back to your kindergarten first day. Were you the second child and eager to go because you were wondering where the oldest child went and you felt like you didn't get to? Or were you like me, the eldest child, frozen with fear, feeling like you were being kicked out of the nest, that everything good was going on at home, and you were being shoved into this horrible situation? Fear can grip you at any age. It can take over your life. So for me, on that first day of school, I woke up and I cried to my mother, "Mommy, please don't make me go. Please let me stay home." And she, like any good mother would do, she said, "Honey, you're gonna do fine." She held my hand and we walked up the block together because the school was right at the end of our block. I could see all the kids playing in the playground. It was intriguing to me, but it was still a fear because Mommy wasn't going to be there with me. So we get to the classroom, and I did not pass the doorway. I was still out in the hallway with my mother, who was equally traumatized because I was her eldest child. going to school for the first time. So she would try to get me in, and we would go back, and try to go in, and go back. I don't know how long we were there, but it was way too long. And finally, Mrs. Winterbottom came out, bodily grabbed me, and took me into the classroom, kicking and screaming. I can't remember the day, it was quite a blur, but when we got out of school, Ken Gentili, my husband, we were in the same kindergarten class. He was one of the kids where his mom, came by, kicked him out of the car, kept going, and he did fine in school. He was coloring, he was singing, "If you're happy and you know it, raise your hands." He had a great day. And those kids were coming out with coloring papers, and they were embracing their mother and telling them what a great time they had. They had made friends, and they were asking them to come over their house. So now, fast forward to Toastmasters. Last October, Ken tells me I want to join Toastmasters, and the two of us work at Verizon, and there's a Verizon Omni Toastmasters in Lake Mary. So Ken says we're going to go, and I thought, well, I'll just wait out in the hallway. That frozen kindergarten child. And we get there, and everybody was warm and welcomed us into the group. And when it came time for table topics, Ken was all raising his hand. He was all eager to do it, and I was voluntold that I would do it. But we still made it through it. I cannot tell you what I said, how many ahs, ums, and buts, but I did it. I broke that ice. So then, as we stayed and we joined the club, because he joined the first night, of course, and joined me too, I got to watch other people speak. And Mary was one of the first ones I heard speak, doing her icebreaker, and she started off with this beautiful song, and she told us about her life, and it just was just so engaging and inviting. So what did I do? I copied it. I started with a song, told about and I nearly broke down and cried in front of the group because my speech was about how my mother chose life for me. I was supposed to be aborted, but here I am, kicked ice, made it through. So when you come to these points in your life where you have the opportunity to volunteer rather than be voluntold, take those opportunities, grab onto them, not only break the ice, but kick ice and keep on doing it. So for us with Toastmasters, we didn't just join Omni, we started Verizon, Lake Mary Toastmasters. And like you all saw on your contest printouts today, Stephen was supposed to be here today, and at the last minute he canceled. So here I am, told, giving a speech. And I, back in October, would have never imagined that 5 minutes before a speech contest, I would be brave enough and not frozen with tears in my eyes and crippled to get up in front of a group and speak, to share personal things about myself with total strangers. It is the most rewarding and encouraging place to be at Toastmasters. They have welcomed me in, they have given me encouraging bits of information, and if there is anybody out here in the group today, I encourage you to not only join and break the ice, but be like Ken, volunteer, don't be voluntold. Just do it and get over any of those fears that cripple you, and tomorrow will be a better day for you. And can any of you remember your second day of kindergarten? Can any of you remember your second speech at Toastmasters? Just do it, get it over with, break the ice, and then continue to kick ice. And as you're kicking ice, encourage other people along the way to do the same.
silence, please. Ladies and gentlemen, contestant number 5, Stephanie Berger. Mirror, mirror. Mirror, mirror, Stephanie Berger.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the smartest one of all? Not the preacher, not the teacher, not my parents, certainly not my mother. Mr. Contest Master, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guests. Foolish words from a rebellious, rambunctious rapscallion of a child. But from about the age of 10 on, I really believed I knew more than my mother. Well, don't look at me like that, I'm not the only one. I thought my mother old-fashioned, out of step, born old and never young, a fuddy-duddy, constantly espousing trite cliches and dull old platitudes. Waste not, want not. Never put off for tomorrow what you can do today. And of course that sticks and stone thing. Always spouting words of wisdom. I pasted a feigned look of interest on my face, while in my mind, my eyes rolled to the back of my head in sheer boredom. Didn't she know this was a different generation, a different time? She couldn't possibly understand the challenges I faced, or so I thought. I was the hip one, the glib one, the with it one. While she, at 30-something, well, let's face it, archaic, antiquated, and way past prime. My mother believed in children being children. She tried never to involve us in grown-up affairs. She did her best to keep us simple, uncomplicated children. My mother dressed us in a manner befitting our age. When my grade school friends sported form-fitting skirts and cashmere sweaters, my sister and I donned plaids and pleats and bulky knits. The other girls wore their hair in beautiful buns and fancy French rolls. I got braids, the old-fashioned kind, the ugly ones, with lots of barrettes and bows. I wanted so desperately to rock a small heel pump. I got Girl Scout lace-ups instead. They looked to me like combat boots. One of my mother's favorite sayings was, stay a child as long as you can, for once you're grown, you're a long time grown. How I wish I had listened. Instead, I challenged, argued, snarled, and rebelled. Such a hurry to grow up. When Mom grew weary of dueling with me, she became silent, painted on a mystic smile, much like that of the famed Mona Lisa, as if to say, just live. It's been said that a parent's revenge is grandchildren. They get to watch history repeat and enjoy it. She did. As a teenager, I was the cool one. Savvy, sophisticated, down with all the hip jargon and slang words, up on all the fashion latest dances and trends. That was my job. Apart from the cooking, cleaning, washing, chaperoning, a mother's main purpose was to, well, stop our fun. As if they derived some perverse pleasure in keeping us from a good time. Does this sound familiar? I can't wait till I'm grown and out of here. I'll be so much happier on my own. No one will tell me what to do. Just live. My mother represented stability, a steadfastness, a comforting dependability. I could count on her. She was never wishy-washy. Once a decision was made, it was etched in stone. There was no going back. You couldn't cajole, you couldn't promise, you couldn't cry. A decision was made. How comforting to know that you have parents that can be depended upon to do what they're supposed to do in spite of the efforts of a trying child. Yes, even a saucy, sassy, assertive child like me came to appreciate parents who could not be controlled, who could do what was expected of them as parents in spite of my best and worst efforts. A word of encouragement to any of you who are dealing with tumultuous teens. These are the trying times. Stick to your guns. Wait them out. Time is on your side. Even when they throw out the dreaded, "I hate you," don't cave. Remember, it's the discipline and the rules that they hate, not you. The time to be their parent is now. Be the parent they need and not the friend they claim to want. How do I know this? My mother is now my best friend. We travel, shop, and play together. Most of what I know, I learned from her. It's been a lifelong lesson which continues to this day, and I can truly say I wouldn't have it any other way. How did all this happen, you ask? Well, either mom got cool or I got old. Mom, look at the time. How I go on. My mother would say, time waits for no man. My mother would say, mirror, mirror on the wall, I'm my mother after all.
At this point, we'll have